Well, good day, everybody. This is Joe Van Cleve. Welcome back to the Typewriter video series, and a short little video today. Yesterday, I decided I needed to go and look at this Olivetti-Underwood 21. I've had this typewriter for probably a decade, and I've only ever done a little bit of cleaning and servicing with it. I think I maybe cleaned out the slots in the segment, changed the ribbon years ago. It's actually a cotton ribbon and it's a little bit frayed on the edge. I'm gonna have to put a new ribbon into it eventually, but I never really cleaned it and serviced it, and of course I was too interested in servicing it to actually shoot video of me servicing it. One of those deals. But I discovered a little thing about this. When you want to test the type bars for whether or not they're free and loose and easy to move, there's a little trick I learned with this machine that might help you guys, so stay tuned. So I got this typewriter years ago at a thrift store that was down on Lead and Yale in Albuquerque that's no longer there. The person that ran the thrift store told me that the guy who brought this typewriter into her told her that he rode a motorcycle cross-country to New Mexico in the late 1960s, and he wanted to become a writer, and he traded his motorcycle for this typewriter. Now, when I got the typewriter home in its case, I found a couple things in it. So it had this Remington Rand typing guide, and there's some scribbles on the back of this page that don't really apply to typewriters, I don't think, but it's a cute little typing guide. It tells you basically how to touch type, all the finger positions, etc. But it also had with it the user's guide for the Olivetti-Underwood 21, including all of that and all of that, which I do need to scan and get this online somewhere. But in the process of looking at this little guide, there's this little yellowed piece of paper, and it's dated February 29th, 1968, and it's an exchange between a car dealership and Nichols Business Machines. And so it's kind of has the provenance of the story that the thrift store owner told me about this typewriter. That, yeah, sure enough, it looks like it was an exchange between a car dealership and a typewriter shop. So I don't know who the writer was, or the person was that came out here to New Mexico to be a writer, but in the late 1960s, it would have been a wild trip, and, you know, New Mexico was still kind of, well, it still is, a little bit wild. So that has an interesting story to it, but this has always been a really cool typewriter. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is pull off the ribbon cover. So now I'm going to flip the typewriter upside down and take off the bottom panel, and just be careful of the carriage return arm when you do that. And you want to put it on a padded surface. And I was pretty impressed with the construction build quality of this typewriter. All the body panels are cast metal. They're not stamped. Okay. So what we're looking at is this piece right here, this strip with this felt underneath it is the universal bar. Okay, when you're testing the typewriter just this way, you might think that, oh, I see the type bars are moving freely. It looks like everything is okay. But what's actually happening is that universal bar that I showed you that's underneath the machine, it's spring-loaded and it's pushing up against the linkages. So it provides a little spring tension on the linkages. So the fact that it looks like all these type bars are returning freely is part of that is because the universal bar, the spring tension on that bar, is pushing them back away from the platen at the end of the typing stroke. So if you really want to test to see if your typewriter is actually free, if all the type bars are free, what you actually have to do is reach underneath the machine, like I'm trying to do, and you have to pull the universal bar back like this, pull it back so it's as far down as it goes and it's not pushing against the linkages. And now you see how the type bars are not spring-loaded. See how they fall back under their own weight now? Now this is how you can truly test to see if any of the slots are gummed up. They should fall back under their own weight freely. And this is how you can find these nagging little problems where some of the type bars tend to hang up, but when you test it normally you don't find it to be true. But when you're typing fast, it sometimes just interferes. You have two type bars that jam up for some reason and you don't know why. Well, that's because one of them is sluggish to return. And you can only see it when you pull down on that universal bar. So again, to deload or unload the spring tension of the universal bar from the type bar linkages, underneath the machine here, this strip, you want to pull it toward the bottom of the machine, which is, as I'm doing it, it's toward you, toward the camera, but it's toward the bottom of the machine. Keeping it pulled that way unloads the spring tension of the universal bar from pushing against those type bar linkages, and then that's how you can actually test whether the slots are truly free or if they're still gummed up. So servicing this machine was actually fairly easy. Take off the ribbon cover. There are 4 screws, here, and one here, and one on the other side of the carriage back here. You take off those 4 screws and the whole body shell comes off the chassis. Of course, the 4 feet on the bottom to take the bottom off. And after you do that, you'll have easy access to the whole segment and the carriage itself area, the carriage area. Now, for cleaning the carriage, you can flip up the paper bale, and there are a couple screws underneath here that hold, that you just loosen, that this whole bluish paper table slides off once you loosen those screws. There's some screws right here and on the other side that takes off this entire rack for the margin setting. So the whole margin rack and margin scale comes right off. This paper table comes right off. There's a spring spring on each side, so 2 springs that come off to take off this paper table, and the springs attached to the bale itself. And once you get those off, you have easy access to the pressure rollers underneath the machine and to cleaning the platen. And also it gives you opportunity to take off the tiny little screws and oval-shaped metal washers for the plastic card guides. So it's easy to take apart those parts of the carriage to clean. But the main thing for cleaning the type bar segment is the slots. And what I usually do is I'll cover the keyboard with a heavy rag. I'll cover the carriage so you don't get any splashes in there. And then I start off usually with isopropyl alcohol, 91% isopropyl alcohol. And after blowing out the dust with an air gun, and when you do blow out a chassis of a typewriter with a compressed air, you want to be careful about not using too much velocity of air, because it could dislodge one of the springs in there and cause you to lose a part. So just be gentle. But after I dust it out, and I use a stiff brush to dust the loose parts out, I'll start flushing the segment slots with alcohol and working the typewriter keys, working those type bars, and trying to get it to free up. And if the alcohol doesn't do the job, then you want to go to lacquer thinner. I use a little plastic squirt bottle with lacquer thinner in it, and be careful with lacquer thinner, because if it gets on any of the painted surfaces, plastics or whatever, it'll dissolve it, or discolor it. So anyways, it took me quite a bit of time to work on getting these slots cleaned. And there's also slots of the segment, like secondary slots underneath the primary ones. Underneath this casting right here, there's another set of slots, and then there's some slots underneath where the linkages connect. And all those 3 sets of slots, you want to get those nice and clean and degreased. And otherwise, that's pretty much the basic way to clean it. I also clean the rails for the carriage and the little rollers that the carriage rides on, and put a little bit of light machine oil on those so the carriage moves freely. But basically cleaning the typewriters like that. Oh yeah, there's also slots up here, this whole bar, these typewriter slots, the type linkages go through the slots. You want to clean and degrease those. But the main thing is when you're testing the type bars for how loose they are. You want to de-weight or deload the spring tension from the universal bar off the linkages so you can truly tell and watch those type bars just flip back and forth in the slots, see how free they are. And you can definitely tell when they're not clean because they won't return. They'll just hang up and stay there. When we're thinking about typewriter maintenance, a lot of us hobbyists like to do as much of the work as possible ourselves. And that is always a good thing to do, I think, because most of us aren't made of money. If you have 10 or 20 or 30 or more machines, you're obviously going to need a lot of maintenance, and you really can't afford to send all of your machines out to the local typewriter repair shop to get fixed, even if you have a local typewriter repair shop. But the other side of the coin, though, is there are a few remaining typewriter repair shops around the United States and perhaps other countries, and we should support those businesses. I firmly believe, in learning to do minor repairs, cleaning, maybe adjustments to the machines as much as we can so we can become self-sufficient. But on the other hand, these typewriter repair shops are an invaluable resource because they've had decades and decades of experience. In many cases, they are multi-generational businesses. They've learned from their fathers or even grandfathers, and there's a legacy there. And also, they are a rich resource of repair parts and just skill and knowledge that is irreplaceable. So I would encourage you guys, I think there's a balance here between us learning to do everything ourselves versus deciding there's a certain point at which, okay, I'm in over my head. I'm going to take this to the typewriter repair shop and let them work on it. And I'll give you a great example of that is last year I decided to tinker with my Hermes rocket. I was having an issue with the tension on one of the pressure rollers, and I decided if I could take the platen out, get to the pressure rollers, maybe I can work on that. Well, it was a really terrible thing that I did. I couldn't get the machine back together properly. So what did I do? Well, I was slated to go out to Phoenix for the summer 2018 Phoenix Type-In, so I just took the typewriter with me and dropped it off at Bill Wall's Mesa Typewriter Exchange, and Bill did a great job, fantastic job, reasonable price. It was an ideal circumstance, really, because I gave him business. We had a little bit of fellowship together as typewriter people. Got to visit the typewriter community out in Phoenix and Mesa area, and the machine came back in great shape, works great, and I'm happy that I paid the modest amount of money I did for a repair job, right? I think that was fantastic. So I think the story here is you can do minor stuff, cleaning and stuff like that with these machines, but also try to support your local typewriter repair shop or your regional typewriter repair shop. Yeah, so that's a little trick that it might come in handy if you're having intermittent problems when you're kind of typing rapidly and somehow the type bars kind of jam up on you more than they should. You don't really think you hit the keys. Well, this might be one of the reasons. The type bars are actually sluggish, but you're not really detecting it with a normal test because the spring tension of the universal bar is hiding the problem from being found. I wanted to mention, though, briefly, when it comes to maintenance of typewriters, and especially tutorials on YouTube about typewriter maintenance, there is none better than Phoenix Typewriter. Go visit Phoenix Typewriter's YouTube channel. The guy has been servicing typewriters for decades. He is a true professional, unlike an amateur like me, and he has great videos. Go and look at his channel. Okay, this is Joe Van Cleve with a short little tip on maintenance of your Olivetti-Underwood 21 or Studio 44. And until next time, stay creative and have a great day. Bye-bye for now.